are honored to welcome Dr. Vinod Skaria, Senior Consultant at Vishwanath Cancer Care Foundation, Adjunct Professor at Gangwal School of Medical Science and Technology, IIT Kanpur, Visiting Professor at Ashoka University and North Bengal University, a clinician turned computational biologist, co-founder of the Genomics for Understanding Rare Disease India Alliance Network, and a PhD in computational biology from the University of Pune. The COVID-19 pandemic has seen his lab pioneer genetic epidemiology of SARS-CoV-2 in India. His lab today hosts the major resources enabling genetic epidemiology as well as functional interpretation of genomes and genetic variation. He is the recipient of CSIR Young Scientist Award for Biological Sciences in 2012, Kavli Frontiers of Science Fellow of the US National Academy of Science in 2015, and is an elected Fellow of the Royal Society of Biology and the Royal Society of Public Health. We are extremely proud to let everyone know that he is our senior from 42nd batch. As a leader, administrator, teacher, and clinician, we hope that his many talents and work ethic will be a source of inspiration for all the young doctors gathered here today. I would like to welcome Dr. Vinod Skaria, sir, for the inaugural address.
Respected members on the dais and off the dais, dear parents, my younger colleagues who are getting initiated into this noble profession, a very warm welcome and a good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for inviting me back here, because like you all, almost 20 years ago, we passed through the portals of this great institution. And I'm humbled and honored also because many members on the dais and off the dais are also my own teachers. In many ways, we have been very fortunate, and every time I come back here, it comes with a lot of nostalgia. It reminds me, and of course reminds us all, I'm sure many of my classmates are also in this audience, reminds us of the many years that we spent in this institution. 20 years ago was a different world, and I think we were very fortunate to be in that world. Not trying to say that it's not interesting now, but life was far more simple then. A lot more changed, I believe, in the last 20 years, for good, and for certain, some for bad. We were fortunate in many ways, but of course unfortunate also in many ways. Unfortunate because for us internet was available only in two places in the college, one in the alumni office and the other one in the library. But today, fortunately, every one of you carry internet in your pockets. For us, PubMed used to come in CD drives or floppy disks. And this for us, at least for some, were what we call as Patri in MH1, for some at least, and for the rest was floppy drives. I'm sure you would not appreciate either of it. But nevertheless, some things doesn't seem to change despite 20 years. And I'm sure you would have all experienced that, including the beetroot chutney in the ICH. Well, having said that, we had a lot of fortune, and we were in many ways much well off because of a little knowledge. And as you would imagine, a little knowledge will actually make you very confident. In fact, a lot of us were confident that we could read Harrison from cover to cover. And in fact, some of us could cite Harrison from cover to cover. And that was pretty much all, because there is nothing beyond Harrison in medicine at that point in time. But unfortunately, that is not true anymore. You can read Harrison from end to end, and today you can still feel not confident that you need to know more or you need to be learning more, because there is much more than what is in Harrison today. In our times, of course, you could make a diagnosis of breast cancer. You could send for a histopathology. The pathologist would send adenocarcinoma of the breast, and you could probably start treating. But not anymore. Today, you have to do the molecular analysis of it, at least for 3 markers. And if possible, also do the RNA analysis so that you can prognosticate the individual. And of course, the treatment modalities and the treatment regimens have actually undergone a lot of change over the last 20 years. So many of us who might have been confident at that point of time don't feel confident today to treat. And I'm sure as young members who are getting initiated into this noble profession, you should feel the same. But fortunately, there are many ways that you can change around you. In many ways, you are in the midst of a drastic change in medicine that I'm not sure you would appreciate. Medicine seemed to be very stagnant for many years altogether. But suddenly in the last, I would say, 2.5 odd decades, things have started changing for good, of course. And that change is only going to accelerate in the coming decade or couple of decades to come by. So in many ways, like the Chinese curse, you are in the interesting times. And to me, there are 3 things that I think is going to change the face of medicine in the decades to come. And the first of it is, of course, genomics. 20 years ago, in 2003, humans were for the first time able to read the blueprint of what we all are, what all life forms are, that is to read the sequence of ourselves, the human genome. And 20 years from that day, today genomics has actually become standard of care or standard of diagnostics in a variety of areas. I'm not sure you would appreciate. Today, if you are an oncologist or you want to aspire to become an oncologist, you cannot practice without doing genomic analysis, without understanding what genomics is. And I'm sure that's going to percolate much deeper into many other specialties, pediatrics, rare genetic diseases, for sure. It's already become one of the standard modalities of diagnosis, the first lines of diagnosis. And it's only going to become far more into every specialty. And if I were to predict the future, I'm sure many of your children, the first test done would probably be a newborn whole genome sequencing. And I'm sure in the next 1 decade, many of you, and if not in the next 2 decades, almost all of you would have your genomes done. And I'm sure your patients will also step into your clinics with a genome sequence. So you need to be prepared and you need to be knowledgeable of how to interpret and how to treat those individuals appropriately. The second, of course, is going to change medicine is artificial intelligence. And I'm sure you're very well aware about it, because a lot of talk, a lot of chat, a lot of talks are happening on artificial intelligence. And in many ways, artificial intelligence is increasingly going to replace a lot of mundane tasks that you do. And that would necessarily mean that you would have generations of doctors who might be replaced by machines, only by another generation of doctors who know how to use artificial intelligence better. So I think as a bit of advice, it is probably the right time to start learning and to also start practicing artificial intelligence in your lives, in your practice, because in the next 1 decade, there are only going to be doctors who will use artificial intelligence in their practice, who are going to replace doctors who probably do not do it as much. And the third is, of course, the new therapies that are going to come. And it's not that they're just going to come, they're already coming. And I'm sure in pharmacology, you would have learned about a lot of small molecules. You would have learned the mechanisms of a lot of molecules. And I'm not sure you would appreciate that almost a third of new drugs in almost all specialties, including oncology for that matter, are not small molecules anymore. They are biologicals. They are antibodies, they are protein entities, which can bind very specifically to the targets much better than small molecules. Apart from that, what you would see in the next 1 decade is a complete slew of new therapeutics which are based on gene editing, genome editing, and of course cell-based therapies. And I'm sure you would have already appreciated that last year the US FDA has approved at least a dozen of them, including the CAR T cells. CAR T cells is just one example of it, but there are many more cell-based therapies that are coming up in clinical trials. And in the next 1 decade, I'm sure a lot of you would be using biologicals, genome editing technologies, and cell-based therapeutics as routine treatment modalities. So that would necessarily mean that you might have to relearn pharmacology all from scratch. And that would also mean that you may not be adept at keeping names of these drugs anymore. Have you heard about a drug called hexaglomcel? Have you ever? Probably not. That was a new gene editing therapy that was approved last year. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that all that you learned in medicine is going to be waste? Probably no. Does it mean that you will be insecure in practicing medicine? Probably yes. And what can you do to change that? And I think as young members in the exciting new world, what you need to be sure is that once you pass the portals of this institution, you have not stopped learning medicine. You have probably only started to learn medicine. Because the medicine ahead is completely going to be different from what you have learned. And therefore, you need to learn, unlearn, and relearn almost everything that you thought you had learned. And more importantly, while you might already have decided on your specialties, I'm sure I did talk to a couple of your members and did realize that you're already very focused on what you want to achieve. In many ways, you already know what specialties you would want to practice. But keep in mind that while you would have decided on your specialties, always keep an open mind that there are many more things that are happening around you. And the most exciting areas today to be in is not in the middle of a specialty, but at the edge of the specialty where it touches the next specialty. To give an example, if you want to be a neurologist and probably you like a bit of oncology, you might want to be a neuro-oncologist. If you want to be a rheumatologist, but you have a bit of interest in genetics, you might want to be in autoinflammatory diseases. The field is growing so rapidly that anything that you do with passion, fortunately, and anything that you can do with passion and you can build your knowledge base deeper is going to make a difference, how small your effort is. So I think that is going to be very different, very distinct from the world that we lived in and the way that we learned medicine. And more importantly, as young members, you need to realize that medical education is just a standpoint of what you want to be. It's probably the right time to identify your passion, identify what you want to be in life, and to actually dig deep, get a bit of more knowledge, not more, a lot of deeper knowledge in your area of activity that you want to passionately build. Unlike the older specialities that were there, medicine is becoming so large that in fact your generation of doctors might be able to invent new specialities which were not there before. And more importantly, while it's expected out of you to practice what you know, and that's what doctors are trained for, what you need to keep in mind is the next one decade is not for people who practice knowledge that is already there. Of course, you can do that. You can make difference in the lives of millions of people by doing that. But you need to focus not just in practicing what you know, but creating new knowledge that others can use. In other words, if you contribute to knowledge that others can use, you have an opportunity to not just touch millions of people, but to touch billions of people. Because the knowledge that you can generate is going to be used by tens of thousands of doctors like you. And if you think that knowledge generation cannot happen in India, you might actually be wrong. In fact, I'm not sure you appreciate that India is 1/6 of the global humanity. And if you don't create knowledge in 1/6 of the global humanity, then probably you might not be able to create knowledge. You have a lot of opportunities to create knowledge that the rest of the world can use, the rest of humanity can use, and I'm sure as young members, you need to give a thought on how I can contribute to the vast expanse of knowledge that medical field or medical science would contain in the future. And last but not the least, in the future where knowledge is going to be prime, skills are going to be prime, and machines are going to be prime, I think what is really important as young doctors you need to learn and you need to practice is to be better human beings. Because as human beings you have emotion, you can have compassion to your patients, which machines may not have, which evidence may not bring to your table, but your patients will eventually look up to you just because you are a good doctor. And a good doctor doesn't necessarily mean a doctor with a lot of knowledge, but a good doctor would be somebody who can use knowledge, can use skills in a very compassionate way. I think with that, I should have you all join the fraternity as younger members. A very hearty congratulations to all of you for having toiled to the MBBS days, getting initiated with a license to treat patients independently, with a license to learn more, the license to practice what you know, and more importantly, the license to generate knowledge that the rest of the world can use. Thank you very much.